welcome again to this Google Sites Staff Bitesize training. So I want to kick off with a couple of examples of Google Sites, because for some of you, you may have already seen these floating around the uni, but some of you may not exactly know what a Google site looks like. So let's have a look at some examples. Here is one that a member of our team produced for a project, a Digital Creativity Week project. And this is a real website on the internet. You can go to this. If I paste this link into the chat, you can have a look and you can navigate around it. You can click links, you can click different pages. You can see we've got images, we've got videos, we've got text content, we've got buttons, we've got lots of things going on. And we've got a nice clear sense of navigation. I've got a clear sense of pages down the left-hand side that can clearly show me where I need to go. Just as a different example of how different sites can look, we've got this small website from a member of our team back in the early days of AI at York, and you can see visually this is much more distinct from the previous example. It's very different in terms of its layout. It's got quite a striking image on the front cover. And again, we've got kind of navigation where we can navigate around the pages. Down the left, it gives me a really clear sense of getting around. We've also got our colleague Tom Smith's case studies site. And again, this looks quite different. We've got kind of a tiled view that we see a lot on web pages these days. So tiled content with links to take us off to different pages and even to external pages at times. And just as a last example, if we don't want it to be so busy, but we want just a nice place to host things where we can host links and send them out to people, again, we've got our University of York's add-ons website, where we've just got a simple one-page website with some links out, some very important statements down at the bottom, which we'll be mentioning later in the session. But yeah, we've got some nice simple sites. We've got a real range of different ways that sites look. Now, in terms of what you might be using your Google Sites for, just to note that at this stage, we're not looking for Google Sites to be replacing entire departmental web pages that would live on the york.ac.uk main university site. Because if it's something public facing that people need to know about the university, then it should live on the web CMS. And if you're unsure about whether you're using sites for the right thing, the communications team kindly agreed that you can drop them an email, and I've posted that in the chat now, communications-support@york.ac.uk. If you're a little bit nervous about whether the thing you're creating should be a Google site or not, you can drop them an email. What I'd say it's great for is kind of internal facing things, projects, portfolios, showing off your work, hosting a bunch of links. It's really useful for that, really easy to create, really easy to collaborate on, really easy to embed Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Sheets, and so on. So that's some quick examples of what Google Sites look once they've been created. But how do we actually get into our site editor? So a couple of different ways you can do this. If you're just on a new tab in Chrome, or you're on the Google page and you're signed in, if you go to the app launcher here, and you go down to Sites, Google Sites is a part of Google Workspace. So it works in a similar way to Google Docs. You could just Google Sites, or go to sites.google.com. And this is your main area for where all your Google Sites live, and all the ones that you've been shared with by you. So here we can see all of our sites, and they'll also live in our Google Drive as well. But we can create a blank one, or we could use a template. Now, I would heartily recommend not using a template, because you'll spend more time getting rid of content, changing the color of content, and your site may look a little bit less distinct if you think these templates are available to everyone in the world. Millions of people are using Google. So maybe click on them to give yourself some inspiration for how you could lay out a website, or some inspiration in terms of color and things like that. But some of these templates are not the best. And you can see at University of York, we don't have any templates available there either. But there we go. We've got some general templates, but I would say steer clear of those for now. And let's just create a blank Google site. So I'm going to run through with you now the basics of using Google Sites. Then a little bit later, I'm going to hand over to Alice to look at how to make your website accessible, because that's a really important consideration with these websites. If we're creating one, we want to make sure that everyone can actually use it and access it. So just on the basics end for now, this is your site's editor, and this is your draft space where you can start creating your site. Nothing is going to be floated to the internet or the web or anything like that until we actually hit publish. So this is kind of our playground here for playing around with things, adding content and mucking about really. And the first thing I want to do is give this website a name. And there's two places to put this website name, which is a bit odd, but the first name box is how this will appear in your Google Drive. So if you want to call it something distinct in your Google Drive so it's easy for you to find, then you can give this a different name to your main website name, which is this bottom box here. For now, and in this demo, I'm going to create a very quick mini site for Your Create, which is our 3D printing makerspace based in the library. So I've given it a nice quick name. And the first thing I've got available on this page, on this home page, is my header. And this is what appears at the top of your initial page. Now we can just give it a simple bit of text there, and we can, as you can see as I type, I get my standard text editor bar here where I can choose my font. I can look through all the fonts available on the internet. I can throw in links and all sorts of things. But I can also change this header type. As I hover over, I've got the option to change the size of this header to be from just a title, really simple, a banner, a slightly larger banner, or a cover. And a cover's the biggest one that we've got. And that's, the cover is like that AI at York site, bit like that, big and bold. But then you can see you have to scroll down. You're relying on your audience scrolling down to find the content. Now, I'm going to stick with a banner for now. The other option I've got here is adding an image. And Alice will talk a little bit more about this later on. But this is where we need to be a little bit careful because for one, we need to think about copyright, but for two, we need to think about accessibility because I could upload an image to have as my banner. I could select an image from Google Images or from the stock images, but we need to make sure that the text that's on top of that image is clear and readable. There's a little toggle here to change the, to make sure that it's readable. But again, just err on the side of caution with banner images. Again, Alice will come back to that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, we can edit our header around as we like. The way that we edit our Google site is through these three main tabs. There is the Insert tab, the Pages tab, and the Themes tab. We're going to stick on the Insert tab for now. I'm going to look at getting some content in here. So you can see down here as I scroll down, I've got all the content types I can add. I can add a nice simple text box, images, things that I've got from Drive, so videos or Google Docs or Google Sheets or Google Slides. It's really good for embedding content. Even entire folders if we want to. We can link off to an entire folder. We've got these content blocks that help us lay out our content. So if I click on one of these, it gives me kind of a template where I can hit this plus button and add something. So I can use that to create visual things. And we've got tons of different options down here. Now, I'm not going to have time to go through every single one of these today. I would encourage you to play around with a blank Google site and see how these different things work. But we're going to start with the basics for now with just adding a text box. So just click on the text box and there we go. I've got it here. I want a title for this page. Alice will talk a bit more about heading styles later on. But again, I can just have a little title here. Welcome to Your Create. And hello. I can add some text there. Now, I'm not going to sit here and type out loads of content, but the main thing I want to show you is how Google Sites kind of works in terms of content blocks and moving things around. Because this is where the real power of Google Sites is, the fact that we can do all of this without coding. So you see as I'm highlighting this content block here, it's turning blue. And it's a little bit like a text box in Word. I can resize it. And I can kind of create columns. So I could have some more content to the right here. So if I add another text box, if I hover over a bit of content, you'll see I've got this little grabber. And I can grab this block of content, and this could be an image, it could be text or anything. And I can move it up alongside or wherever I want in this Google site. And from this preview, this is showing me where it's going to land. So I could have two columns of text here. Or I could have an image next to this. So that's the kind of real power of Google Sites, the fact that we can add stuff and we can move it around really easily. So I could have an extra bit of text here as well. And suddenly I might have this decision in my mind that I really want to just change the layout of this site altogether. I've got lots of content on here, but I'm not happy at how it's looking. I want to take this entire section and move it above there. So on our individual bits of content, I showed you we've got that grabber. But down the left-hand side, we've got our entire sort of row of content here that I can grab, and I can click and hold, and that little blue bar is previewing me to show that this could be moved above that block of content there. So in just a click and drag and move, I can rearrange the entire layout of my site nice and easily. Okay, so that's kind of the bread and butter of how Google Sites works in terms of grabbing content, moving it around. I also said that we have these content blocks, and these can be really good for helping visually lay out your content. So if I click on this one, what it's giving me is a couple of headings and normal text boxes, and then this plus button here where I could upload whatever content I want. So if I hit on the plus button, I've got the option to upload something, select an image from my drive, grab anything else I want from my drive, or embed a YouTube video, calendar, or map. Pretty much anything will go in this box. But when we think about adding images, there's a couple of different ways we can do it. I could click on the images button here and choose to upload something from my local storage, so my laptop, or I could select something from Drive, or I could just search within Drive itself. The other option I've got is double clicking where I want that content to go to bring up this little toolbar. One of the kind of fiddly things with Google Sites is knowing where your content will be added. If I just hover over this bit here and then hit text box, it's going to add a text box where I am kind of looking at. But if I use that double click feature, I can be a bit more accurate in terms of where I put my text. I can be a bit more precise where I want that to go. I didn't click in the right place there, but there we go. You can be more accurate by using that double click. So let's look at adding an image anyway. So I'm going to use this method. I'm going to go to Images, and I'm going to select something from my Google Drive. So you can upload all your content in advance. Here we go. Recent, I've got a nice 3D printed tank here, which is kind of useful for me. But I could also search through my drive to find the appropriate things I want. This is just like your standard drive search. We can filter things by content. So if you've got a busy Google Drive like I do in my main account, I'm probably going to use these filters to find the exact thing I want. Or I can just click through and find what I want. So if I go into Bits, I've got all my Your Create images and videos here. So let's bring in this frog. I haven't used the frog for a while. We click on it and we can insert it. Now we can use Control and click to select a series of things, but I'm just going to add this one for now. I hit Insert and there we go, I've got a frog. It works just in the same way as my text content did. I can move it around if I want to. I can shift it beside the text that we had earlier. I can join it to text panes like this and have a 3D printed frog. There's a little caption there. I can crop it, I can full screen it, I can add a link to that image, so I turn that image into a button so that when people hover over it, they can click that image and it will take them to the correct place. So yeah, dead easy to add images and move them around. And the same is true of videos as well. I can go into my Drive, and this time I'm going to do it through Drive, and you can see it's opened up this little side pane here. And I can look at all my content, but this way I can also look at my shared stuff and stuff in my shared drives. But we grab our content and we pop it in, and then it's good to go. So let's grab a video and insert it. And there we go, I've got a video. It looks a bit weird like this, but the thing I want to show you next is the button that you will probably be pressing every couple of minutes when you're building a Google site, and that is the preview button. Just at the top of your screen, when you hit the preview button, it's going to show you what your website will look like when it's published live. So if I hit preview, now this website doesn't look very interesting because I spent about 5 minutes on it, but this is great for looking at how this will look on different screens. So as I scroll through, I can see how big that image of the frog is. Do I actually need to go and crop that? Will it be a bit better to be a smaller image? I can see my video. That looks a bit weird, but when we click on it and play, that's kind of because of the aspect ratio of the video. But I can see how different things look on the site. And as well as seeing how they look on a desktop PC or a large screen, I can toggle to see how they look on a tablet and how they'll look on a phone. Because Google Sites does the reflow work for you. It reflows things sort of from left to right as you add them in columns to be in this sort of mobile format. So you can think about how people are going to access your site. If you've got sort of mobile as the priority for people accessing this site for any given reason, you can prioritize the layout of your content around that. and then we can exit our preview there. Okay, so remember that preview button is going to be really useful. We've got our things like undo last action, redo last action, and we've also got our version history here, which is really useful. So if you start making edits to the site and you think, oh, I much prefer how that looked at this stage, we can see the minutes by minutes, different versions. We can restore that particular version, we can make a copy of that version, and we can name that version. And you can do this for individual pages on your site as well. Now I'll come to talk about pages in just a second. But as I say, there's loads of different content types. I'm not going to talk through them all today, but the main thing you need to know is how things move around, how to add things from your drive, how to add text, how to use these content blocks, and then go and have a little play with these other ones. Button is a particularly useful one. If you want to link people off to different things, you can add a button and you can choose the text of it, have a link there, and it will link people off to different things. Okay, so we can embed Google Docs and Google Slides here as well. The important thing to know about this, though, when we're embedding something, so if I embed a Google Doc, for example, let's just grab something, the first doc I've got, is this. When we share our site publicly, the things that we embed will have the permissions that they have in our Google Drive. So this document here is something that I've got in my Drive area, and it's currently restricted so that only I can see it. Now, if I publish this to the web, or I publish it to just the University of York, which we can also do, at the moment, people will not see any of this content until I share it with sufficient permissions. So that is what this warning is telling me. And this is true of images and videos, sheets, slides, and so on. If I change this to be allow anyone at the University of York to access as a viewer, this means that people will go to my site and then we'll be able to see it. Now, this is slightly different. If we've got a public site, we'll need to go into that file. We'll need to share it so that anyone publicly can view it. The one we do not want to do is make anyone publicly an editor, because then, of course, anyone that stumbles upon your site will be able to go onto your doc and edit them. So just be careful around your permissions there. Okay. So on this instance, I would share this document, and then I know that if I'm sharing this with the University of York, anyone that's got access to this website has got access to view this doc. The other thing here is you will see that this document looks like it's cut off and I've only embedded half of it. That is not true. This is basically the portion that will appear on the screen. So when I go to preview, let's go to our large screen view, you will see for this Google Doc, I've now got a scrolling wheel, and just the portion that I had sized there appears for people to cycle through and read. What some people make the mistake of is trying to drag this document all the way down to have the entirety of the document on the page, and then the page takes forever to load because it's trying to load the entire document at the same time. So when we're embedding documents, we want to try and keep it to a readable size. So we're not going to embed something like this because that would be a bit silly. People can't really read it. But we don't need to go ginormous either. We're going to go for a sensible size that people can scroll through. Something around this is a nice kind of place to live. Okay? But make use of that preview button and get feedback from people in your team, your peers, and so on around that to see if they can access it. So that's the Insert tab. I'm aware that this does not look a nice site, and it probably won't by the end of the session because I'm busy demoing loads of bits. But let's have a little look at the Pages button now, because at the moment I'm just living on one page. But what if I wanted more than one? What if I wanted a home page, but I wanted a details page, an about us, a contact us page? So I'm going to go onto the Pages tab. To add a new page, really simple, we just hit the plus button here and we go New Page. So I'm going to have a gallery page, for example. Now you'll see at the top there, I have now got a gallery page there that I can toggle between here on my site and in my editor as well. And I could add another page as well. I could do a contact us page. You can have loads of different pages. And this is where we really need to think about how do people get around our site? Is it clear? What I see some people making the mistake of is we can move these pages around, so I can click, hold and drag, and I can change the order of them nice and easily. I could even make let's make a social media page. I could even make sub-pages by clicking, holding and dragging one page on top of the other. And you can see this is now a sub-page. But what some people do is they think all of this needs to sit under the Home tab, or they do something funky like this, and then I've got to go home to gallery to contact us, and it's a nightmare to get around this site, so I don't really want to do that. I want to give a really clear sense of navigation. So if I'm using sub pages, I don't really want to overuse sub pages. I want to think about how it's easy, is it clear, the site layout, can people get to the content they want? And again, testing can be good on this. Having some buttons on the homepage can be useful for this. But just being aware of how people get around your sites is important. On the three-dot menu, we can set a different page to be a home page. We can duplicate pages. We can add sub-pages from here as well. We can even do hidden pages. So if we want to have a page that we link off to but doesn't appear in our menu navigation, we can do that. If we want to just get rid of a page, we can delete that also. There's a couple of different page types as well. There's a standard new page, as I showed there. We could just use a new link. And what that is there's no page, but there's a link in the top of your navigation bar that will link out to another page. So I could have a link here to the York Rate University of York web page, and then when people click on that link, it will just take them off to that. The other one I could have is a menu section. So if you've got kind of a topic and you've got lots of sub pages that will sit beneath that, but you don't want that main page to be a page in of itself, like this contact page is, we could use a menu section like this. So I could have a contact us page, and I could have within that in fact, let's just drag and drop this, our social media page. Now, the difference between this and a normal sort of main page is that I can't click on contact us. It's not a page in itself, it's just like a menu. It's a drop-down menu. So that is a really useful one to use if you don't want to clutter your website up with multiple pages that are unnecessary there. So yeah, those are our page types, and I'd say the key thing to know about here is just thinking about how people get around your site. Is it clear enough? Now, I can use this top navigation, but some of the examples I showed you there had their pages sitting down the left-hand side. So when I preview this site, you can see my pages here are all along the top, but what if I wanted them to be down the left? If I go into the settings wheel, the very first option I've got is navigation, and under mode I've got top or I've got side. Okay, so when I exit out of this, you'll see this gives me what we call a hamburger menu, which I can click and close, but when I preview this, it's open by default. This is personally my preferred way of getting around sites. It depends on how many different pages there are, but this gives me a really clear snapshot personally to see what's actually available on the site without having to go between all the different pages. So side navigation works for me, but again, it's up to you. Do your testing, see how your site looks. Themes then. Themes, let's go on to themes quickly. So my site is looking a little bit plain at the moment, but if I want to change how it looks, this is where the themes tabs comes into play. Now, we have some preset themes here, and these are Google's own versions of these themes. So we can click one and we can enable it. Some of them are, kind of nice and understated. Some of them are a bit, why is there a sort of plank of wood and pine cones and a stick and a set of matches? I don't know. Just some weird stock imagery and stuff like that. Now, these preset themes are okay, but again, everyone is going to be using them. So I would potentially stay clear of them, and you could perhaps pick a nice plain one and play around with it. That you've got limited options here. You can change the font styles, you can change the color, but really, for me, the better way to go is to have a custom theme. So when we go into a custom theme here, we can name this theme. We can add a logo at the top of our site. So if we want to add the University of York logo, we can do that. We can add a banner image for the header, but again, we need to be cautious around that with accessibility. When I go next, I've got a sort of a preset color palette, and these are the three colors that will dictate the theme, but I can change them later. That's not a problem. I can customize those by all means. It doesn't mean a lot until you go forward and you see what we can edit, but I can change what titles and headings, what font titles and headings will appear in. So I could have, a Poppins font here, and the body text to be a different font. But once I create the theme, you'll see I have a much more expanded theme editor here than I did with my presets. So this is where I can really dig into all the different colors of my website. So these styles These dictate when we want to color a section up. So for example, this section here, if I hover over to the left hand side under the section colors, you'll see I've got styles 1, 2 and 3. Those were those styles I had in my theme builder. I can click those and I can change the backgrounds. But in my theme builder I can change all these styles. I can change the type of text, I can change how buttons will appear, I can change my logos, I can change my favicon, which is an interesting one. The favicon is when we're at the top of our Google site, it will appear with this kind of sites button here, this little sites logo. That's called the favicon. And all Google sites have that by default. But if you want yours to stand out, you could create a custom favicon like this. So you can see we've got this little shield here for our subjects guide. So if you want your site to stand out in your tabs, you can upload a little favicon here. You can also do that from the settings. But yeah, loads of themes that things we can change around in our themes here. But this is where, when we're talking about color and once we're talking about fonts and heading styles and things like this is where we need to pay attention to accessibility. So I'm going to stay screen sharing, but I'm going to hand the mic over to Alice to talk us through a couple of accessibility principles.
Yeah, this is our tribute. Next slide, please. So this is a quick sort of ramble through some of the key accessibility points. One of the really big ones is, as John said, about the navigation. So one of the things around that, and it depends what your site is and how it's going to be used, but don't overload pages. People don't want huge amounts to scroll through with those menus. And whatever you decide to do, be consistent. Consistency is one of the really, really important things. We find this makes a huge difference to people, whether they're navigating who are dyslexic, neurodiverse people, people with anxiety, because things are following the same model, it's easier. But it also makes a huge difference for anybody who has any visual impairments because they're expecting things to be in roughly the same place. If it's wildly different each time, if someone's using magnification, they're going to have to scroll all of the page, or it won't behave the same with a screen reader. So whatever you choose to do, make it consistent, is our main one with that. And as John mentioned, if you can get a colleague to test it, or if you ask somebody, see if you can find this on the website, that's quite a good little rule of thumb, that if they're kind of like, why have you put it under that title? Or it just kind of sort of a bit of sense check that somebody can find information on your site is quite a good quick way of checking that. We've got a picture of a 3D frog there. So one of the things that's quite important with websites and with any of your text is to add alt text, which John's just highlighting there. So it's very easy to do once you've added your image in, alt text. So you've got two options there. So if it was just a kind of flourish and it was a little squiggly thing that was welcome to your creates, but wasn't really important, we can mark it as decorative, and that's the little box John's highlighted there. So essentially, that will just skip past in a screen reader. It's not important, they're not missing anything. However, the description will tell them what's there. If you don't do this, if you don't mark it as decorative and you don't put in a description, the person will have image and they will potentially get the file name, which is usually a string of letters and makes no sense. So they'll know something is there and they'll know they've missed something, but they won't know what it is. If you have the description here, if it gets to that, it will go image, and it will then read a 3D printed tree frog. Now, for this context, I mean, does what it says on the tin. That is a 3D printed tree frog. There's not a complete hard and fast with alt text. We do have a guide on this. It depends very much on what you're doing. For websites generally, often we're just using these images as kind of ways of breaking up the page and kind of enlivening our content, in which case you don't really need to do a huge description. This is fine. If you're doing an art history website or something with very complicated diagrams, there are different approaches to that. That is more complicated. Don't put words in for the sake of it. If we just need to tell someone this is a 3D printed tree frog, that's fine. We don't need to tell them it's a photo of it particularly, unless you're doing an art website where this is an oil painting or this is a watercolor and the medium matters, that's fine. The thing never to do is to put a picture, because the screen reader reads out at the beginning image. So they know it's a picture. So we don't need to do that. So think about kind of what is it somebody who is sighted is taking from that somebody who can't see it wouldn't be taking. So one of the general things is not to put text in there. So we've got welcome to your create as the text there. John hasn't put an image in that says welcome to your create. So a screen reader can go through that. You can see we've got the cursor there. A screen reader recognizes that as text. We haven't got text as image. So yeah, as I say, we've got some guides to image editing, including guides to alt text, but the mechanism to add it is there. try and be concise and try and think, why have I used this image? What am I trying to convey? That's the kind of key point for alt text. But either do mark it as decorative or do put something in there, because otherwise people will know there's an image and they won't know what it is. So the next thing we're going to mention quickly is heading styles. We're not going to go into this massively because we talk about this a lot in creating accessible documents. And as with everything, we've got a skills guide for that. And John has an example document there that he's put in. But essentially, the kind of heading styles that you would do in a document, so having the title and different headings and text, that allows you to jump through, allows you to go, I'm just going to skip through the headings to the right section, and allows that quick navigation. You can do that on the website too. So if we want to have different sections, we'd give each section a heading, and somebody using a screen reader can skip through the headings and then hop down to the normal text afterwards. So in the same way that when you're structuring a document and you use heading styles, you do it here. I mean, as you'd think, it's extremely similar to the Google Docs one. And we do have guidance on that. It behaves exactly the same way. But in the same way that you want someone to be able to hop through this and navigate, it's a really important thing for somebody using a screen reader, but it just makes it easier to read for everybody. And again, that consistency is really important. So that's a useful thing to be able to do. Contrast is another one. So John mentioned this a little bit when he was talking about the headers, and it's various things here. Essentially, we want a nice strong contrast. So what we've got here is a pale background with a dark text, and now we have a text that we can't read. So it's there. We've now got magic eye text, which isn't very helpful. So thinking about this, you want a nice strong contrast. So whether you have a dark background with light text or vice versa, fine, but make sure you think about that. Things to bear in mind with that are the kind of font you're using and the scale. So we can see obviously hello and 3D printed frog are a little bit harder to read. Welcome to your crate is a nice big simple one. These are sans serif texts, which I would generally advise if you're doing a website. The general rule of thumb is that a sans serif, which is one of the fonts without all the squiggly joined up bits, is easier to read on a screen than not. So something like Merriweather or Times New Roman are serif fonts. So if we have a look at one of those, they've got all the little flicks and fiddly bits essentially, which is fine if you're doing it as print, but on a screen it tends to be a little bit harder to read. So it might be something that you'd associated with printed work, but it's not generally as easy to read on a website. Again, that's a nice big version of it, but again, the smaller the text gets, the easier it is generally to read in sans. And again, having a think about where we'd want that, I wouldn't go below normal on that one, because otherwise you're getting into that very naughty text of kind of the terms and conditions in tiny, very difficult to read text. You don't want that. Everyone hates reading that kind of thing. So think about the size of your text. And there's I wouldn't really put anything too small. Do practice the previews. Again, as John said, think about how people are using this. If your site is something most people are going to be accessing through their phone, how small is this text going to look? You don't want it all to be huge text, but you don't want it to be tiny. Is it comfortable for you to read? Get a colleague to try and read it. One of the other things to check with on this as well, and this is the incredibly basic thing and it sounds stupid, but it does work. Squint at it. Can you still read it? If I squinted it, I'm losing some of that small text. So maybe that needs to be a bit bigger or a bit darker. If you squint at it and you cannot, in text disappears, you've done something wrong with the contrast and the size. That's the most basic test. I can see that John has got lined up Who Can Use, which is a favorite tool of ours, which we recommend quite frequently. This is really good for anything design wise, because it lets you put in the text at different pixel sizes. And you can have it bold or not, and then you can try it on different colors. Now these have the hex codes. Now this is really handy if we're doing anything to a brand template. So if you look at the university brand colors, they will all have a hex code, so you can pop that in and see which ones can go with which, and whether it's better to have white text on it, as with this, or black text on it, or that kind of thing. So we can see what's going to work and what isn't. So it will give you the overall web accessibility rating. So we've got a AAA on this one, but we can see as soon as we go into slightly different things there, we're failing. We've got a nice fail. But what's interesting about this, it does also show you what different people would see. And it's got situational at the bottom, which is something to think about as well. So again, if this is an app that you're expecting people to be using on their phone when they're out and about, direct sunlight is going to be a problem. You want to think about glare. So this is a really, really useful tool. We should get a sponsorship for this because we recommend it a lot, and it's not university affiliated. It is just free online, whocanuse.com. But the fact that you can use it with hex codes and just pop different things in is really handy. And if you are working to a brand palette, it's a really useful one to do. So that's with that one, with the themes and things. We have got a Google Sites guide because of course we have. We've got a guide for everything. Now, this depends what you're using your site for. So if this is for your own portfolio or project, that's absolutely fine. You can do what you want with it. If it is official university output, it comes under the public sector body web regulations of 2015, with which I assume everyone is very familiar. But just in case not, essentially, there are some accessibility things we have to do for public-facing digital output. And this is something to be aware as well, that John mentioned about making sure that you've got your sharing settings right. Do think as well, if you're sharing something on an official university project or something, that you made sure you've checked your documents and so on as well, because they would also need to be accessible. So what we need is an accessibility statement, and to make it as accessible as possible. Now, there are tools in there. We've seen that we can change the font to a sans serif font. We can make sure we've got good contrast. We can put alt text on everything. John's talked you through that, and we've got a little section there. John is just highlighting. So we've got the alt text and captions, we've got heading styles and so on there. So going into a little bit more detail than we've got, but we do have that guidance. What you'll then need to do, we've got two things to help you through this because we realize it's a little bit tricky. We've got a checklist and a template accessibility statement. Now, when John showed you some of those sites earlier, and if we show Phil's site as a little example of this one, if we go to the bottom, Phil's got the statements there, and we've got legal statements, privacy, cookies, and accessibility. And if you go to any official university website, it will have that. Now, you need to have your own accessibility statement for the Google site. The university website has an accessibility statement, but that's designed for the university website. It's not designed for Google sites. So you need to create your own. We know that's a bit scary, so we've got this accessibility statement template that we've created, which is in the format that you need. And you can make a copy of this and go through. And we have gone through and written it out. Now, if you use all the accessibility features in Google Sites, so you go work through the checklist that we've got, and then you use this, this will cover it. If you do something a bit weird, so you decide to embed strange and weird tools, you will need to add anything in there. So if you've added in a weird tool that's got terrible contrast, you'll have to say, there's this page that might have very bad contrast, or this isn't keyboard operable only, or something like that. You have to try and put in as much information as you can with that. So we can't guarantee this will cover you if you do something a bit off the wall with your site. But if you are using it in a fairly traditional standard way and you're using the accessibility features, this will cover it. And this is to help you because we know it's a bit daunting to have to look at these. The other thing with this is it's not a single checkpoint. So you do this, but you also have to go back and review it. So it should be at least an annual review, ideally 6 months. And it might be that you go back and nothing's changed, so you don't need to change anything, but you just update the date. That's absolutely fine. We have that for some university web pages where we go back and we check things, we check a tool, has anything changed? Nope, fine, we'll just update it, but you do need to go back and check. It's quite a bad thing that there's a number of websites you can go and have a little look at, and it's always a bit awkward because you can see that it was last reviewed in 2021 or something like this. It's not a great thing to do. So do make sure that it's kind of up to date with that as well. And we have the checklist there as well, which I think John has got the link to there. Yep, there we go. And again, you can download and make a copy of this. And this is, again, just to take you through everything we've talked about today, really, and it sort of ties in with the guide as well. But we've got all those links to what you might need to do. And again, depending on what you do, you might not need to put captions on because you might not have got a video. You might have done something quite simple and it might not matter. But this is just going to walk you through all those different things you need to do. So if it is a university official project, so say you're doing a particular university funded conference or project, you'll want the university logo on it, you will want the accessibility statement. If it's for a student project, if it's for your own portfolio of stuff, you don't need that, but it is good form to do it. and it certainly looks better on research things if you have done that. So either way, we've got the guidance for that there, which I think brings me back to
Yeah,
you,
that is
John.
perfect. Thank you, Alice. So let's say we've got that accessibility statement. We're going to copy the link for that. I've adapted this. I've made my own copy. I've filled it all in. What we can then do is go to our site, and at the bottom of kind of any page of the site, you'll get this add footer button here. And this is where we could add our links. So I can add footer, and I can add a link, but I'm not going to do it like that, am I? Because a screen reader is going to read out https://. So we have all this on the guide as well, for you to copy the relevant privacy statements and so on. But for your own accessibility statement, and for any links that you add, we're going to use the insert link button. And we want to make sure that we've got a nice clear link. So in the bottom box, I paste my link. I could link out to, one of the pages on my site if you want a specific accessibility page. But in the top box is where I'm going to put what text will appear for that link, because we don't want to just say click here or go here, because that's not a clear indication of where someone's being led to. If we have the raw URL, the screen reader will read just that, but also just from a kind of a security point of view, you want to show people where people are going to. So in here, I'm going to put my text accessibility statement and apply. There we go, I've got a nice clear link at the bottom, and because it's in my footer, it will now appear on every page on my site. So what I would say is have a little look at some of the example pages. I'll send this one out in our post-session com, so you can have a look at an example of it with the correct statements and everything. The guidance is there on the guide as well. But yeah, that's some key accessibility things there now. So as we're coming close to the end, let's have a little look at how we actually publish this site. It doesn't always catch me out, but there's always one. How do we publish our site, and how do we collaborate on it with other people? So if we want to work on this with other people, we do, just like other workspace items, have the share with others button. So this is where, if I wanted to work on this with Alice, I could add Alice here, and I could give Alice editor permission or just the access to view the published version. If I've got a site that wants to be locked down to just 5 or 6 people for whatever reason, I could have published viewers. Or if I wanted it for testing purposes, to give editor access to Alice, but it expires after today, then I could add that expiry there. But when I go back to our main sharing menu, you'll see in all Google Workspace items, we have this general access button. But in the Google site, we have an extra option. So we've got access to, we can control access to the draft, which can be restricted, or just the University of York or anyone with a link. Now that means that anyone with access to that will be able to edit it. So this is where we need to be careful. But we also have the published site access. So anyone at the University of York can view it if they've got the link. They're not going to just happen upon it until you kind of link it out to them. But we could also change that to be public. Okay, so if we wanted this to be a site that's viewed on the web, then we can make that access public as well. With the draft, again, this is where we need to be careful, because if we've had published site access to be University of York, anyone at the University of York can view, but for the draft we're saying anyone at the University of York can edit, then what will happen is when we send that website out to people, they will have a little pencil icon in the right-hand side of that site that will allow them to go in and edit their site. So if you were thinking about how to collaborate on your site, you need to think about your draft access. Who are you going to give that to? And as well as that, where are you going to store this site? When we create a site, it's going to bounce up by default to our My Drive. So you can see this is my website today, and it's living in My Drive. Now what happens if I leave the university and this is an important site? Well, my stuff is going to get deleted, and so is the site. So we want to think about where we store it, and we'd recommend for sort of collaborative efforts on that, making use of a shared drive. We recommend shared drives at all times. Now we do have a separate training available on Google and a workspace guide on shared drives, and we'll link that out at the end as well. Alice, sorry, did you have something here?
Yeah, it was just to say that also with that, again, if you're linking to documents, pop those in a shared drive too. So if you have a folder in a shared drive with all the documents and assets that you might have on your website, so whether that's images, but particularly documents, spreadsheets, anything you're sharing like that, because we do see the thing where somebody leaves and suddenly you end up with like a weird 404 error because nobody can access the document anymore, things like that. So as John said, shared drive's a good thing for the site, but also anything else that goes with it, pop it in a folder on a shared drive.
Absolutely, good point. Now in my settings I can kind of restrict access a little bit more, so I can untick whether editors can publish and change permissions and add new people. So you could have just a particular owner of the site, but again, this can go a bit funny when we're in a shared drive. So you may not make use of that, but if it is in your My Drive, you can do that if it's a personal site, if it's a personal portfolio or something like that. But anyway, this is how we can share a site, but at the moment I haven't got this published to the web. So what I need to do here is when I am ready and happy with this website, I hit the publish button. And for the first time you publish a site, you are asked, what do you want to name this site? How do people get to this? So you're asked to add a sort of suffix to the URL. Now by default, URLs are https sites.google.com/york/.ace.uk/ whatever you put. So I can have York right here. Now you can get your own URL. There is a process for that. The information for that is available on our sites guide. It's a case of asking your DCO, your Departmental Computing Officer, to send a request on to IT support. But you need to have all the relevant links there in terms of privacy statements and so on. For now, we just hit the. I'm just going to keep it like this with the standard URL, and I'm going to hit publish. So you'll see that I've now got a little drop-down arrow here. Now, from this, I can change my publishing settings as I did earlier to change it to public or just University of York. I can unpublish it if I get cold feet and I think, whoa, let's take that back off the web. But I can also view the published site. So while my preview button showed me the changes in the editor, the view published site button will show me the changes that are live here now. So I can see this website, I can scroll through it, and you'll see that pencil icon. That shows me that I have edit access to this site. So to get back to my editor, I can just hit the pencil button there. But that's all we need to do for publishing a site. Whenever you make changes, they won't be live again until you hit publish again. That will update all your changes. So if I change things around, it will allow me to review my changes to see what's been edited and publish again if I so wish. So that is Google Sites in a nutshell. Now, I know that we go through these sorts of things quite quickly because we want to keep it to an hour so that you have got your time to actually attend. But remember we've got the recording. So if anything wasn't super clear, if you want to retrace your steps and have a little look back at what we've done, we're going to make the training available to you all. We have also got that sites guide which talks through everything that we've talked through today, but in far more depth as well. So if you have a little look at our sites guide, that's where we've got our templates there. We've got some suggested exercises if you want to have a practice. But that is our whistle-stop tour, our bite-size session on sites.